What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, checking out the Serge Knife Co Slip 7. And this is going to be more of a first impressions because I've only had this knife for about 3 days. And I've really strayed away from doing these type of videos, mainly because I'm further behind. Most of the videos you've seen recently or that are coming up are knives that I picked up 2 or 3 months ago. But honestly, I prefer it. It allows me to spend more time on a knife, and I'm not making 2 videos on the same knife, although they do end up appearing in videos on the channel in the future. It's not as kind of urgent to get them out. It doesn't set me as far back having to make 2 videos. So for the most part, I have stayed away from these, but I always have exceptions. You know, obviously if I receive a knife pre-release and it has to be out by a certain deadline, usually the release date, that's pretty rare on this channel, but it does happen and I'll make exceptions for that. Same thing with sales. So I did one a few weeks ago because the knife was on sale for a really good price. And obviously if you're going to end up wanting the knife, it's preferable to get it at that lower price. So I'll try and push it up for that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it follows the same schedule. Now in this case, I'm making an exception for 2 reasons. One being that there's no other videos on this particular knife on YouTube, which is pretty rare, honestly. A lot of knives nowadays get sent out to bigger channels and there will be 10 reviews by the time it releases or on release date. And so that's not super common. And I like seeing videos when I'm shopping for knives because it gives you a better sense. You know, you can read the specs, but seeing it in hand might give you a better sense of scale, or you see the curated pictures, but seeing the fit and finish or the action moving in a video, even if you're not listening to what the person is saying, I feel can be pretty helpful. So I figured might as well put something out there. Now, the second reason is that these are serialized, which tells me this is probably a limited run. And I have no idea how many were in that run. I know less than 1,000 because it's a 3-digit serial number. But if I waited my normal timeline of 2 or 3 months, you may end up, well, they probably end up being sold out, and then you have to chase it down on the secondary, which is never fun. These are still available, which is this kind of main reason why I'm making a video on it. And so let's get the knife in frame because it's more interesting than that box. But as the name implies, this is a slip joint, and a very modern slip joint, not just in materials, but in construction as well. And I want to start off by talking about Serge Knife Co if you're not familiar with it. This is the production line of Serge Panchenko, the designer behind this knife. And he usually makes custom or mid-tech knives, but he has his production line, which I'm really grateful for because I'm a huge fan of his knives and it gets them at a pretty accessible price. I paid $140 for this on his website, which I think may be the only place that's selling them. And I think that's pretty reasonable for the materials we're getting, not to mention the designer behind it. And so he has pretty fair pricing on these production lines. So super cool. Now, did want to show the box because it does say Serge Knife Co on here, which I don't think you'll really see on the customs or mid-techs, but it has his maker's mark here as well, which isn't on this knife, but is usually on his production line. And so if you see just the SP without the second P, that's usually going to be on his customs and his mid-tech, but that P that you see separately is for production. So if it says SPP, it's a production version. So worth mentioning. Going to move that out of the way now though. But as I mentioned, really modern materials and construction. Let's start with the materials. The handle is a grade 5 titanium, specifically 6AL4V, and is stonewashed, which matches that blade really, really nicely. And that's something that can be pretty hard to do, I think. Sometimes you'll see a stonewashed blade with a stonewashed titanium, and they're very different shades. It's almost seamless to transition from one stonewash to the other. And so I think that looks really excellent. And I think he has one of the best stonewash is in the business, and so love the way they look. It's a really kind of rough and tumble look. You can see a lot of marks in it, and so it's going to hide imperfections really well. Now that blade steel is a Bohler M390, so you're getting a premium steel, and so for the materials, $140 is starting to feel extremely reasonable. And so as you might guess, these are made in China. I don't think it's possible to use these materials, make it in America at that price point. Maybe wrong, but it is made in China. And we don't know who the OEM is on this specific knife. He works with a lot of different OEMs that tries to find the right one for each of his designs, and I'm sure pricing comes into play there as well, but really capabilities to pull off the design that he's making. And my guess is that the OEM isn't listed because they don't want to be. There's probably an NDA out there that says he can't say it. And I guess that because he lists it for his other knives. So if you look on his site right now, the ones that are in stock, the Rager was OEM'd by Real Steel. The Trisect was OEM'd by Bestech. And so if he could list them, I'm sure he would. It doesn't seem like he's trying to hide it. It seems like maybe the OEM doesn't want it out there, and that's pretty common. It's unfortunate though, because especially when they make a really good knife, you'd think they'd want some credit for it, but that's not the case, so we don't know who OEM'd this one specifically. We can probably eliminate Real Steel and Bestech since we know that they let him list them as the OEM on his other knives, but other than that, no idea. Really well done though. Now, besides those materials, I mentioned the construction. So you see that we have body screws instead of pins. We also have a pocket clip, which you wouldn't see on a traditional, as well as a lanyard hole, which every once in a while you'll see, but it's not as common. And now, I want to mention something about all of these. So this pocket clip isn't reversible, which is of course unfortunate. I wouldn't have minded if it didn't exist at all, but since it exists, it would be nice if they took into account the lefties. But what that means is that we have a really clean show side, and love the way the show side looks. They eliminated any billboarding of any sort, so there's nothing on the blade or on the handle that has any branding or steel stamps, anything like that. The pocket clip is not reversible, so you don't have an extra screw hole or inlay space here. The lanyard hole even is not tucked into the spring. It's actually on the scale, but only on the non-show side. And so besides the hardware, there's really nothing showing. And so love the aesthetic on here. Like I already mentioned, I love the stonewash, and the straight lines and everything about this show side is stellar for me. Really like the look of it. Now, that pocket clip is titanium as well. The hardware is not. So worth mentioning, because a lot of times you get titanium scales and pocket clip, you might expect titanium hardware, but in this case it is stainless steel hardware, so that's worth noting for sure. Now, as far as the dimensions go, and I'll do that before I get more into just kind of the action, the walk and talk and all of that, but as far as the dimensions go, we have a knife that should be legal most places, a 2.7 inch sheep's foot blade. I already mentioned it's Bohler M390, nice stonewash on it. It does have a full flat grind, with the exception obviously of this wedge here, but a nice full flat grind, feels really good and really well done. Sharpening choil on that as well. The handle is 3.7 inches, and so I'm able to get a full 4-finger grip, and it's a really comfortable grip. The pocket clip definitely disappears. I don't feel like I'm gonna slip out of position, even though it's a pretty straight line, and that can lead to, you know, a little bit of slipping. So far it hasn't been an issue, but we'll see in kind of the more long-term look of it if that does become a problem. But really comfortable overall in that light grip, and able to get a 4-finger again. Now, if you have larger hands, if you have an extra large hand, your pinky might slip off a little bit there, but for me, it just gets on there. Overall length on this is 6.375 inches, and it weighs in at 2.3 ounces, so nice and lightweight as well. Now, two other kind of design things that I want to talk about in this closed position. First is, one, it does have an exposed tang, which obviously isn't as popular. It's not everyone's favorite, and for good reason. You can catch yourself on there. It's kind of ugly looking in that closed position with that tang exposed, but I don't mind it so much in this case, because what it means is that when you open it up, you get this really, really clean and straight lines. And so if it stuck out a little, or if it tucked into the handle, you probably would have had to extend that a little bit. We might have lost some of those straight lines, or it might not have been possible to get those straight lines. And so I'm willing to trade that off for such a clean look when it's open, but not going to be everyone's favorite. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention in that closed position is the spring on here. So that's pretty unique in that he didn't try and line it up with the handles. So there's no liners or anything, but didn't try and line it up with the handles. It starts off lower and it dips even lower. And so with a lot of traditionals, people are looking at what it looks like in the half stop position or the full open position. Is everything still flush? And you really don't have those concerns here, because it was never flush and you don't even really see it. And so not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Some people may like that about having the springs flush with the handle, but I don't mind it, and obviously it's a non-issue on this particular knife. It's also really eliminates the looking at between the handles and the spring for gapping. I don't think there would be any because this is pretty tight, but you really wouldn't even see them if there were gapping. And so just kind of a unique feature there. Now the other thing you might notice is there is no nail nick or anything like that on this blade. It's intended to be pinch gripped and it works well. You have plenty of access and really, really nice action on it. Really good acoustics across the board. Now I will say that I dialed this back just a little bit, and that's because when I first got it, it was insanely heavy. And so that is the nice thing about having screws instead of pins, is that it's pretty easy to adjust that. And when I say extremely heavy, I was able to get it open pretty no problem. I mean, it was heavy, but it was still decent. But when I tried to close it, especially from the half stop position, this was really difficult. You had to put a lot of pressure on it. And so now it's not bad. It's still a guillotine, but it's easy to do with one finger. It doesn't feel too insane, and it guillotines shut, and it's still extremely snappy in that position. I mean, you do not want your fingers there. If this closes on you, you're gonna need King Arthur to get that blade out of your bone, and so definitely want to make sure you're clear of that, but still nice and snappy, but really satisfying now that I've loosened that up a bit. And you can hear it snaps into that half stop, into the open position and the closed position with authority. It has a really nice sound to it, and overall it's just extremely satisfying. So that's kind of it for this knife. Just wanted to give a first look at it. I don't have that many opinions on it outside of those first impressions because I haven't spent that much time on it with it, but I'm a huge fan of the looks of it and a huge fan of Serge Panchenko knives. So really, really happy with it so far, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button if you enjoyed this video. Like I said, I will link to this in the description, no affiliation or anything like that, but it is still available, at least at the time I'm recording this video. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.